Yeah, to my relatives, this is Mark Charles. It is Thursday, November 2nd, and I'm sitting down with my second cup of coffee. And there's a few things I've been looking at this morning, tweeted about a few things this morning regarding SCOTUS, and I wanted to talk about the Supreme Court case today. But before I begin, let me start, as I always do, by acknowledging I'm speaking to you from Washington, D.C., the traditional land of the Piscataway. I want to thank the Piscataway for their stewardship of these lands, and I want to state how humbled I am to be living on these lands today. And I want to acknowledge that the Piscataway are still here. So, yeah, my Piscataway relatives, thank you for the honor of being on your land today. So this morning, actually, it was last night when I began. I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about for my next second cup of coffee. And I had heard during the day a comment made by the Associate Justice Sonia Sotomayor regarding how this case that is now before the Supreme Court, the case they're hearing today, coming out of Mississippi, trying to overturn Roe versus Wade regarding abortion. And she made a comment that she was afraid that this was going to cause the court to be seen as political, and that she didn't know if it could survive the stench of that. And that comment struck me because of other things I've said about both the doctrine of discovery as well as the Constitution. And I thought it was kind of humorous that someone so well versed in the Constitution would be afraid that an issue like abortion would make it political, because certainly if you read the Constitution, especially if you're a woman, as Justice Sotomayor is, you would recognize that there are certain things the Constitution was not written to do, such as give rights to women, or actually to give rights to anyone besides white landowning men. And so the only choice we have then, if we're going to do anything beyond protecting white landowning men, is to make the court political. This isn't a problem with the judges, it's a problem with the Constitution. And so this morning I decided to sit down and I wanted to find her quote. So I did some searching online and I found a good article on NBC that highlights her comments fairly well. And I just want to read some of them for you. I put them into the comment section of both my YouTube and my Facebook. But let me just read some of these a minute. The article says Sotomayor suggests Supreme Court won't survive the stench of overturning Roe versus Wade. And I want to read the first few paragraphs of this story. Justice Sonia Sotomayor used her questions during a Supreme Court hearing Wednesday on abortion rights to urge her conservative colleagues to follow precedent and not politics in deciding the case. She noted that the sponsors of the 2018 Mississippi abortion law, which would ban most abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy, had said they were pushing ahead with the legislation in a court challenge because, quote, we have new justices on the Supreme Court. Then President Donald Trump successfully nominated 3 Supreme Court justices during his first 4-year term, giving the conservatives a 6-3 majority. Sotomayor, who was nominated by then President Barack Obama, said that tossing out the landmark rulings establishing abortion rights would tarnish the court's reputation and open the floodgates to other challenges to well-settled law. And this is her quote. She said, will the institution survive the stench that this creates in the public perception that the Constitution and its readings are just political acts? I don't see how this is possible, she said, while questioning Mississippi Solicitor General Scott Stewart. The article goes on to state that Sotomayor called Roe versus Wade a watershed decision that created an entrenched set of expectations in our society, that this is what the court decided, that this is what we will follow. Overturning Roe would have other far-reaching consequences as well, she warned. It could name any other set of rights, including the Second Amendment, by the way. There are many political people who believe the court erred in seeing this as a personal right as opposed to a militia right. She said, if people actually believe that it's all political, how will we survive? How will the court survive? So I want to make a few comments about this, because while I have stated before that I do not believe Roe versus Wade should be overturned, I say this from coming from a life of wrestling deeply with the issue of abortion. I was raised as a white evangelical and thought anti-abortion was the correct stance to take. I kept that stance fairly strongly until I got to college, and at which point I gave a speech on abortion, and I was confronted by women in my class who pointed out that the stance I was taking showed no understanding of value for the life of the woman, for the life of the child after it was born, for other issues going on within our society. And I realized how deeply short-sighted the pro-life understanding of abortion was, and how inadequate it was to addressing the issues that were much deeper at play. And I literally stopped talking about abortion rights for years while I contemplated what this meant and how to think through some of these framings. And it was during my study of the doctrine of discovery that I began to wrestle with some of these issues even more, and especially as I looked at issues within the Constitution. And so I want to highlight just a few of the things. And if you've heard me speak before, you know what I've said about the Constitution, but I want to just highlight some of these right now. Right, the Constitution begins with an inclusive sounding phrase. The preamble says, "We the people of the United States." This sounds inclusive. It sounds like the document that's being written is meant to include everybody. It's meant to be a very radically inclusive document. However, if you keep reading just a few lines later down to Article 1, Section 2, and this is the section that determines who this document actually covers, we have to note it never mentions women. And that's important because if you read the entire document, preamble through the 27th Amendment, there are 51 gender-specific male pronouns. 51 he, him, and his, who can run for office, who can hold office, even who's protected by this document. Now, people will say, oh, yes, but in Old English, they referred to people as men, and this was an inclusive term. That's a lie. They were very, very sexist back then. Yes, they may have used men to mean everybody, but women had no rights. They weren't included at the same level as men were in society. Old English is absolutely sexist. And read the Constitution. Look at how specifically 51 times it points out he, points out him, points out his. Never mentions women. And then look at the fruit, right? I love how white landowning men get so excited and so proud of themselves. Oh, I've nominated the first woman. I've nominated the first woman of color. I've nominated. It's like, what are you excited about? This is like a 25-year-old man getting excited that he finally learned how to take a dump by himself. Doesn't need his mother to wipe his butt every time. The fact that Joe Biden's nominating the first women for all these different, that's nothing to be proud of, Joe. It's been 250 years. You live in a country that claims it stands on a foundation based on equality. The fact that we're just nominating some of these people for these roles in the 21st century is a condemnation of this nation, not something to be celebrated. Get over yourself. It's about time. It's expected that you do these things. You don't need to be celebrating this. Should have been done long time ago. Anyway, so the point is, the Constitution never mentions women. Never. And our legal precedents, right? Women earn 60, 70 cents to the dollar. Women don't have the right to determine what happens to their own bodies. We do not provide adequate paid family leave. We do not provide equality in wages, right? I've said this before, I'll say it again. If men had to give birth to babies, not only would abortion be legal, it would be free and come with a couple weeks of time off from work. Anyway, Constitution never mentions women. Specifically excludes natives. Counts Africans as 3/5 of a person. Right? So this term, we the people, who do they mean? They mean white landowning men. That's who we the people refers to. That's who the Constitution was written to protect. That's who is at the center of this union. That's who is protected by this document. White landowning men. You've heard me talk about how we've tried to correct this. We've done things like the 13th Amendment, which again, most people think abolishes slavery. It doesn't actually abolish slavery. What it says is neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime. The 13th Amendment doesn't abolish slavery. It redefines and codifies it under the jurisdiction of the criminal justice system. This leads to our massive disparity in incarceration, not only with the rest of the world, but regarding race. So the 13th Amendment doesn't correct the problem regarding race. And then if we look at the 14th Amendment, right? The 14th Amendment was written in direct response to Article 1, Section 2. It was passed a few years after the 13th Amendment, and many people think this is addressing the exclusive language of the Constitution. All persons born or naturalized in the United States, any person of life, liberty, denied to any person. All right, this sounds inclusive. Sounds inclusive. This is Section 1 of the 14th Amendment. But if you read Section 2, representatives shall be apportioned among the several states according to their respective numbers, counting the whole number of persons in each case, excluding Indians not taxed, denied to any of the male inhabitants of such male citizens. So the Second Amendment, or the second section of the 14th Amendment, goes back to the same racist and sexist and white supremacist language. And it also takes another cue from the 13th Amendment, where it puts the criminal justice system as the overseer of civil rights. Between the two male quotes, it says, except for participation in rebellion or other crime, the basis of representation. So basically, it's putting the criminal justice system as the gatekeeper for civil rights, because that works so well with keeping people of color from enjoying full citizenship. They decided to continue to use that as the precedent in the 14th Amendment. So this is the amendment, right? This is the amendment from the 1860s. After this amendment, we still have Jim Crow laws. We still have Indian boarding schools. We still have Indian massacres. We still have internment camps. We still have segregation. We still have mass incarceration. We still have families being ripped apart at our borders. And this is the amendment used in the initial Roe versus Wade case. which determined that unborn babies weren't human enough to be protected by the Constitution, which is what gave the right for the abortion. Doesn't talk at all. Well, this gets much more complex. What this demonstrates, though, is that the Constitution of the United States is a systemically racist and sexist and white supremacist document that assumes the white landowning male has the authority to decide who is and who is not human. During my campaign, I gave a talk, a policy position regarding abortion, and I talked about how our Constitution does not allow us to talk about women's rights, and we have to absolutely reframe our dialogue around abortion. Right? The Constitution was written for one purpose and one purpose only: to protect the rights of white landowning men. It doesn't give a damn about unborn babies, and it doesn't give a damn about women. That's not the point of the Constitution. That's not why it was written. It assumes the white landowning male has alone, and the white landowning male alone has the authority to decide who is and who is not human. So we have to get out of this binary trap that says we're debating the value of life. We're not. That's not what we're deciding. What we're deciding in Roe versus Wade, what we're deciding in this discourse on abortion, the way our Constitution forces us to frame it, the way our politicians force us to frame it, the debate we're having is who gets to decide what women get to do with their bodies. And it's not even do women get to decide. The choice is which group of white landowning men get to decide. That's the debate we have. And because the Constitution is about exploitation and profit based on a doctrine of discovery and meant to center the rights of white landowning men, the Constitution is incapable of leading us to any sort of just conclusion about the value of life at any level. It's not the right tool. This is why abortion is a litmus test for Supreme Court judges, because the Constitution is absolutely silent on the issue. This issue is absolutely, solely political. It is completely dependent upon the opinion of the judge who's coming into the court. And this is why both sides try to stack the court. The Republicans have been a bit more effective at it recently than the Democrats, but both sides play this game. Neither side is interested in addressing the problem, which is our Constitution. Neither side wants to remove the racism, the sexism, and the white supremacy from the Constitution. The white landowning male patriarchy of both sides, of both parties, are just fighting, bickering back and forth about which one of them gets to be in charge. And what baffles me is, Justice Sotomayor, you have to know this, right? The Supreme Court is not some holy, revered institution. It's deeply, deeply, deeply flawed, because it's about interpreting a document that is both implicitly and explicitly racist and sexist and white supremacist. And as far as your argument about precedent, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? In 1823, the Supreme Court sets the precedent that land titles are based on the doctrine of discovery. In 2005, the Supreme Court, in an opinion written by Ruth Bader Ginsburg, upholds that precedent in one of the most white supremacist Supreme Court opinions written in my lifetime. Justice Sotomayor is making a political argument about not letting the court become political. But her argument is deeply, deeply political because it doesn't fit across the board. This is the challenge we face, my relatives. This is the problem. We have to acknowledge, we have to admit, our foundations are racist and sexist and white supremacists. Our precedents are racist and sexist and white supremacists. For 250 years, this nation has centered white landowning men as the god of what they've created here. And that's all we're debating. If we want to change the debate, if we actually want to have just precedents, if we actually want to have real discussion about how to value life, both the life of the woman, who I believe has absolute authority to do what she wants to do with her body, but how do we also protect the life of unborn children? And it is life. It's fascinating to me that, right, while the Republicans are fighting for the life of the child, in abortion, they're completely opposed to the bill the Democrats are trying to pass that might actually lead to less children living in poverty and going hungry, and might give resources to women who are caring for these children. That this is where it's a flabbergasting situation. And politicians continue to stun me at not only their intentional ignorance regarding what this nation is built on, but the way that they make political arguments, even when they say, let's not be political about this, as Justice Sotomayor is doing. She's saying we have to uphold the precedent, but upholding the precedent is when most of our precedents are based on racism, sexism, white supremacy. This is what Justice Ginsburg did when she said the Oneida Indian Nation could not regain ancient sovereignty over their traditional lands based on the precedent of the doctrine of discovery. So we either need to just flat out acknowledge the Supreme Court is absolutely political and treat them that way, or we need to address the problem with why it's political, which is not the judges, it's the foundations. We don't have a constitution that articulates at any level of value for any life outside of the white landowning male from the 1%. It's the only life the Constitution cares about, period. So if we want just decisions, we have to address the racism, the sexism, and the white supremacy in our foundations. But that's not the debate our nation wants to have. Neither the Democrats nor the Republicans want to talk about that. And apparently, most of the Supreme Court justices don't either, because they're just making their own political talking points as they're trying to make themselves look nonpartisan or above politics when they're not. I mean, you have to know the way our whole nomination process works, the way they get identified, the way the litmus tests they have to pass to get into the Supreme Court. If you're on the court and you think you are not there as a political pawn, I don't know what to tell you, right? Santa Claus isn't true either, right? I mean, I don't know what else to tell you. You are absolutely there in a political position. You are. We need to acknowledge that. And then we need to decide, do we want to fix that? And we're not going to fix it by stacking the court in the other direction. We're going to fix it by addressing the foundations. Anyway, those are my thoughts about what's going on right now. And I'm deeply troubled by both the Democrats and the Republicans in this entire debate. And I'm convinced that whatever the outcome, it's going to be deeply, deeply, deeply flawed, because no one is willing to address the foundations. Anyway, those are some of my thoughts. I want to take a moment to look at some of the comments. I had to put my glasses on to see what's being said here. Looks like there's a fair amount of agreement with what I'm saying. We're going to be talking more about this in the next few. I'm going to be talking more about this in the next few weeks and months. It's very unclear when this opinion is going to come out. There's a chance it won't be for several months yet. In the meantime, the debate around the issue of abortion is going to only go larger than it has already. And of course, the partisan media, which makes money off of controversy, is going to do their best to stoke the flames of this discontent and actually do whatever they can to prevent us from having healthy debate on these issues. But I'm going to continue to try to address this, hopefully at a bit more of a level-headed way. Anyway, I want to thank you all for joining me for my second cup of coffee today. And I can't believe it's the first week of December already. I hope you're having a good week. And yeah, walk in beauty, my relatives. And maybe learn how to walk in beauty together. And hakonet.